Alrighty then, so welcome to another alternative factuals video. Now forgive me if I sound a little frustrated because I've done this like 3 times. First time the camera was out of focus, and second time audio wasn't recording. Third time camera was recording. So this is my last and final attempt before this turns into a very regular video. I'm just gonna use one of the audio things and just, call it a day and, whatever. So if this doesn't work, I don't know what will. But, so today we're going to be talking about the whole Sony. They're saying they're going to be releasing a Maximum Carnage movie. And for the most part, I'm pretty on board with it. But I'm going to show you the right way they should have gone about it before they introduced the whole Maximum Carnage movie. But before I dive into any of those details in the video, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you're feeling. And leave your opinions about the whole, Maximum Carnage movie that Sony's going to be releasing in the future. And without further ado, let's kind of dive into this. Okay, so basically Absolute Carnage is a current comic book run that's out right now. It's very interesting. It's written by Donny Cates. Obviously, he's a legend. He's a beast. He's pretty much up there for me when it comes to Jonathan Hickman in terms of, pretty much anything he writes, I'll read it at this point. But for the most part, we're going to be diving into, okay, this is what Absolute Carnage is, as well as the approach that Sony should take when, making their movies. And hopefully they'll be able to make a good Spider-Man movie, because even though the Spider-Man is currently owned by Sony, I still want them to make good movies because I enjoy Spider-Man as a character as a whole. But for the most part, I still feel like, okay, yes, they need to go about making their movies correctly, and they should take, obviously I feel like a lot of people should take the MCU approach when it comes to movie making. And when I say MCU approach, I mean like, hey, make sure that you take your time, don't rush it, tell the story over the course of a longer period of time. As long as it's good, people are going to watch it. But okay, so this is basically how I would set up the movies, even though Sony obviously will have a completely different approach. But this is how Sony should go about, the whole Carnage and Venom and Spider-Man and Maximum Carnage and Absolute Carnage kind of situation. So the first movie I think everyone should see, based on, what we've, already have established when it comes to Spider-Man and the Venom movie that was already created by Sony, as well as a combination of Sony and the MCU, is basically Spider-Man versus Venom. Now, since we have them individually, we already know how they operate as individuals. We need to understand, like, okay, this is what they do, when they interact with each other. We need to have Spider-Man have the black suit starting off in that movie, and then eventually him shedding that suit and then running into, Eddie Brock, and then him kind of becoming the Venom symbiote, and then him becoming the whole Venom situation, and then them fighting each other. That's basically what that first movie needs to establish. You don't need too much of Eddie Brock in there. You just need to put him here and there just so they understand, like, yes, Peter Parker had a relationship with him at some point before he even became Venom. But the only issue when it comes to this is simply because Peter Parker is a lot younger when it comes to, the whole Eddie Brock situation from the Venom movie that Sony already established. Now, they could remedy that by saying, like, okay, Peter Parker was an intern at this newspaper, company, the Daily Bugle, but I don't think they're really going to take that approach, especially because for the most part, Spider-Man has been functional as a hero already, and he's mostly been under Tony Stark's wing before he died. So I think that's going to be a little iffy, but you can definitely find some way to make sure that they interact with each other. It could be Tony Stark, it could be, another story that they worked on, it could be anything, but make sure you have that interaction establishing, like, yes, these two have a very strenuous relationship, and establish that they have to fight in the first movie to kind of understand this is where they stand as of right now. Okay, and then at this point, this is when we dive into the Maximum Carnage movie. All right, so this is the movie that, Sony was, was pretty much initially going to start off with anyway. Me personally, I would not take that approach because there's a lot of storytelling behind Carnage, and if they do it properly, this can actually make them a lot of money. But besides all that, I'm not going to get into logistics of making movies and the money-making process. That's too much. All right, so Maximum Carnage movie. So this movie, we're not going to focus too heavily on Venom or Spider-Man too much. Basically, they're just little, seasoning, sprinklings into the whole, Carnage story. So at this point, this is when we're telling the story of Carnage, Cletus Cassidy, the interaction with him and the Carnage symbiote. Basically, this is where we're going to tell a story of Cletus Cassidy being crazy. He's out his mind. He's out his cotton picking mind. He's crazy. So we're going to tell his story a little bit for the first 45 minutes of that, 45 minutes to an hour. And then at some point, we're going to figure out, like, okay, the symbiote escaped, bonded to Cletus Cassidy, and then at this point, we have Carnage. And then this whole movie basically serves as as a way to establish that yes, Carnage is absolutely crazy. He doesn't care who you are, how old you are, what gender you are, your orientation doesn't even matter. He will kill you indiscriminately, and he does not care. He doesn't do it for any particular reason. He does it for the sake of it. So this movie will establish how much of a threat he truly is when it comes to the whole Carnage symbiote and the Cletus Cassidy, combination. Now for the last, I think 20 to 30 minutes, me personally, I would have Venom then jump in the movie, but not necessarily in a completely important plot point when it comes to Venom, but just so you can set up the next movie. So basically you have Venom show up, and then at this point, once he shows up, he's like, hey, you can't be doing this, because at this point Venom is trying to turn a new leaf. We saw this in the first Venom movie where Venom and Eddie Brock had like a pretty decent relationship, but ultimately we see that Venom is trying to stop Carnage. He gets beat up crazy. His fade is ran crazy, and then after that, he's beat up, he's struggling, he's limping, he's bleeding, and he's slowly recovering but still pretty much badly hurt. And then at this point, this is where he shows up at the door of Peter Parker. And then you end the movie saying, with Eddie Brock basically saying, Peter, I need your help. Black screen. You leave it right there. That's the first, that's the whole Maximum Carnage movie. You end with that. And then basically the next movie in the series of movies that you can create if you want to really make some money off of this will be Venom versus Carnage featuring Spider-Man. Now obviously these are not titles in the movies, and like I said, this is not a fact, but this is the way I would go about introducing Carnage, Venom, and the whole Maximum and Absolute Carnage into the whole Sony universe when it comes to Spider-Man. But this movie, you will have Venom versus Carnage featuring Spider-Man. And then when you do this, you start off where you left off last. Eddie Brock is at the apartment of Peter Parker, basically bleeding out, bruised up, swollen eye, and then he's saying like, I need your help. There's something out there that I cannot defeat. He is technically my offspring, but I need your help. And then basically you get into the minor origin of the symbiotes and what they represent and what they do. He brings up the fact that he knew him, or basically Eddie Brock is telling the story of the symbiote, or the symbiote can tell the story himself. But basically he's telling the story that there's a planet out there called Clintar. But what most people don't realize is it's not a planet. It's just a prison for a being that's much worse than Carnage. You end it there in terms of the reference to Null. And then you basically tell the story that Carnage is amassing power. He's very dangerous. He's one of those people where he's just killing left and right. He's going crazy, and we need to stop him now before he gets any more powerful, because at this point Carnage seems to increasingly get more powerful every time you see him in Marvel Comics. So alright, Spider-Man's like, I'm down to help you, I'll help you, we'll deal with this. Something seems a little fishy about this, but ultimately I will help you. So this movie will kind of serve as an introduction for the following movie, as well as introduce a larger being into the scenario. But ultimately it's going to pretty much end with them defeating Carnage, or the seeming defeat of Carnage, and then the movie will end pretty much right there. And then this is where we get into Absolute Carnage Part 1 and Part 2. Now remember, these are not the titles I'm going to give it, but these are basically just me giving you absolute indications of where the story starts and begins. So Absolute Carnage Part 1 will start with Peter Parker, Venom doing their own thing in New York City, basically them doing what they do, living a life, how it is, you feel me? But ultimately what's going to happen is, Peter Parker and Venom are going to realize people are missing. The city's kind of seems a little off when it comes to the whole situation regarding the lack of police that's kind of looking for these missing people, and the increase of missing people. So basically they know something's off. And then they both encounter the Carnage drones and realize that Carnage has basically been reproducing and creating drones to amass an army and collecting these codexes. And basically this is where we see that Venom and Spider-Man are fighting to link up with each other in order for them to compare notes about the situation that's currently taking place in New York City. So once they establish okay, this is what's going on, we need help. And then this movie is basically I would say The Warriors from back in what was that? That movie was from the 70s, 80s. But that's basically them trying to basically fight their way to find help. So all the way up until, let's say if they started from the Brooklyn Bridge, they're gonna fight their way all the way up and through Manhattan just to find some sort of help. I'm not saying they're gonna be in Manhattan, but I'm just saying in reference to how long it's gonna take them to find some sort of safe haven. And then that movie is gonna pretty much end with them being struggling, pretty much defeated, beat up, and then be like, okay, we need to find other people, and they can introduce Morbius, the living vampire. I would say Cloak and Dagger, but they don't own the rights to Cloak and Dagger. Basically Morbius, the living vampire, Scorpion, even Vulture, people who usually would, they would have some sort of, quarrel with. Ultimately, they will have to find help from, a very unusual group of people, and then you end part 1 right there. Then starting from part 2, you pick up exactly where you left off. The whole conversation with them needing help, them having to take out Carnage, and then this movie basically is going to be the downfall of Carnage over the course of 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 50 minutes. Because if you tell a good story, no matter how long it is, people are going to watch it in the movie theaters regardless. But basically, this is his downfall ultimately all the way until we get to the point in which Carnage is defeated. And obviously, the Absolute Carnage run isn't over yet, so I don't even know how he's defeated. But ultimately, that's basically what you would do in order to kind of create this movie universe around Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage. But also, at the end of that last movie, you can say, all the damage or all the, the codexes that, Carnage collected, at the end of it all, he managed to awaken Null, and then black screen, leave it like that. And then even if you want to do a post-credit scene, you can just flash the planet of, Clintar, basically where all the symbiotes come from, and then you just flash the planet and you see it moving, and then that's it. But let me know what you think about this whole Maximum Carnage, Absolute Carnage kind of situation that Sony is going to be attempting to make when they decide to, make this whole situation into a real life action movie. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you think about the order of the movies that I created for the whole Carnage, Venom, and Spider-Man situation if Sony were to do it. Me personally, I think it's a pretty solid way to go about it. But if you feel like things should be different, let me know. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below, and I hope to see you later on. Peace out.